We worked with them to aggregate the data from the backends of all those systems to say, what are people calling about and what pieces of that can we offload either to online or by giving people clearer guidance about when they should be checking on their claims.
Today on the Daily Scoop podcast from the Scoop News Group, an exit interview with USDS Administrator Mina Hsiang. She discusses her tenure as administrator, USDS's accomplishments, and what's ahead. It's Tuesday, January 7th, 2025. Welcome to the Daily Scoop podcast, where you'll hear the latest news and trends facing government leaders. I'm the host of the Daily Scoop podcast, Billy Mitchell. Thanks so much for joining me. Now let's get into today's top headlines. The Defense Department has tapped Kratos to develop a testbed for hypersonic vehicles under the Multi-Service Advanced Capability Hypersonic Testbed 2.0 program. The other transaction authority agreement is for Task Area 1 of the program known as MACH-TB 2.0, an initiative that broadly aims to expand options for the Pentagon to demonstrate and validate hypersonic weapons and related technologies. If all options are exercised, the deal has a performance period of 5 years and a total value of $1.45 billion, the single largest contract ever awarded to the contractor. Under the agreement for Task Area 1, Kratos will conduct systems engineering, integration, and testing to include integrated subscale, full-scale, and air launch services to address the need to affordably increase hypersonic flight test cadence. Kratos will lead an industry team for the contract that also includes Leidos, Rocket Lab, Stratolaunch, and others. First initiated by the Navy in 2022, the MACH-TB program intends to create new low-cost options for testing hypersonic technologies in order to accelerate overall capability development and fielding. After conducting over 25 flight tests and creating a hypersonic boost glide testbed under MACH-TB 1.0, the Pentagon is now moving to transition that technology from design and concept demonstration to full flight test capacity in fiscal 2025 under the follow-on MACH-TB 2.0 effort. In other news, former Defense Department Chief Information Officer Dana Deasy is now working at Boeing as the organization's Chief Information Digital Officer and Senior Vice President for Information Technology and Data Analytics. Deasy served as Pentagon CIO during the first Trump administration starting in May 2018 and oversaw a variety of high-profile modernization initiatives. He was at the helm when the department moved to large-scale telework as employees adapted to the COVID-19 pandemic. As part of that, he helped establish the COVID-19 Telework Readiness Task Force to boost network capacity and deal with what he called a, quote, unprecedented demand for new equipment ranging from tablets, laptops, and network equipment to secure devices. During his tenure, the Pentagon stood up the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center to help accelerate the adoption of AI by the Defense Department. The JAIC was later folded, along with several other organizations, into the new Chief Digital and AI Office during the Biden administration. On top of that, Deasy was an advocate for enterprise cloud efforts, but the department's ill-fated Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure Initiative, better known as JEDI, fizzled during his tenure. The Pentagon later replaced it with the Joint Warfighting Cloud Capability, or JWCC, program. For more news at the intersection of the federal government and technology, make sure to visit fedscoop.com. Mina Hsiang, administrator of the U.S. Digital Service, is one of the many technology officials who will depart federal service with the forthcoming change in administrations later this month. Hsiang, a longtime government digital services leader, was tapped to lead USDS at the beginning of the Biden administration and has now seen that roll through to the term's end. In a two-part exit interview with FedScoop reporter Caroline Nihill, Hsiang shares some of the highlights from the past 4 years, including a partnership with the Social Security Administration and the success of digital initiatives supporting COVID-19 vaccines and test kits, as well as her parting thoughts on her role, the need for technical leaders inside government agencies, and much more. Let's go now to that interview with Mina Hsiang.
Mina, welcome to the Daily Scoop. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Super happy to have you. Now, we're having you on because, of course, you are a political appointee of the government, and your time at USDS being the administrator is coming to an end in January. Are you staying until January 20th?
I am staying, until the end. I think technically my roll-off day is like January 19th, but we'll be here till the end.
Okay, so how long has it been that you've been in this role? It's been
I think years. I started 6 days after inauguration at the beginning of the term.
Wow. So you've been here the entire time. That's incredible.
Yes. We have a joke isn't the right word, but we have a thing that we talk about at USDS, which is commitment escalation. In the early days of USDS, we had this question whether people would want to come and do this work, and whether people who had highly competitive, much more lucrative salaries would come into government and fight, bureaucratic processes, and how long they would do it for. And so in the very early days, we would be like, come for 3 months, come for 2 weeks. We had these very, very short tenures that we would recommend to people. And it was kind of this try before you buy, not a ton of commitment, go on sabbatical. People would come for 3 months and be like, oh my gosh, this is transformational. This is the most rewarding work I've ever done. And they would stay for the first time I came for 6 months and I stayed for 3 years. And this time I was sold and promised that I would do it for 1 year, but here I am 4 years later. But it has
4
been,
years later.
Totally, totally rewarding and worth it. But I am ready to take a nap.
You're ready to take a nap. I was going to say, you were like, come on, let's go. 4 more years. Let's keep going. But, I wanted to ask you, since it's, you've been doing this for quite some time and you've been super involved in USDS. I know that I've been super aware of everything, all the projects going on, and when you look back over the past 4 years, which seems like probably a very short time, but as we know, very long, what sticks out? And if you can't choose one, that's okay. You can choose a top 3. But which project sticks out to you the most as holding the most meaning for you?
You can't ask a parent to choose their favorite child. I truly and genuinely, I cannot choose, because they all have their own important nuances. They each have an incredible team at the agency that we got to partner with. They each have a different constituency. There's overlapping constituencies, but they each have different demographics that they're helping. So I absolutely would never assert that any of them is my favorite, but we can talk about a sampler as representative.
Yes. A sampler, I as I suggested, a top 3 as the most meaningful to you, as not your favorite, but the ones that held the most impact for you.
Again, I don't know that I would call these my most meaningful, but
okay,
I think
that's fine.
But I think that there are. So one that I would absolutely highlight, for example, is the ongoing work that we have done over the course of my tenure this time at Social Security Administration. So Social Security is a function that touches almost every American, right? It is the second most visited website after the U.S. Postal Service. So people go to check when their mail is going to get delivered. And after that, 170 million visitors a year to the Social Security website. It is crucially important. And this one is meaningful to me. So we have had a lot of starts at Social Security. So when I was here during the Obama administration, we did a little bit of work with Social Security. Social Security is crucially important, sprawling, right? It has so many different programs, from keeping track of your Social Security number and issuing Social Security cards, which are important to many people, to disability benefits, to lump sum payouts when you die, to tracking all sorts of just Social Security payments for people who are retired. And many, birth certificate, many other things. And so we had started doing some work with them, and a lot of their systems are quite old and have been put together over time in a way that, makes it challenging for folks to navigate internally and externally the systems. And so we had started work during the Obama administration. We did, some early discovery sprints with SSA to help them figure out some problems that they were having. They ultimately declined to have USDS long-term involved. During the first Trump administration, we had done a couple of different projects with SSA. And, they were discrete. There was a discovery sprint on the 800 number and sort of how their systems work for that. And similarly, they had sort of declined to do a more long-term type of engagement. And over the course of this administration, the centrality and criticality of SSA has always made it an incredibly appealing thing for USDS to work on, and the extent to which it's so, as all services are, but so technologically underpinned, but also such a human interaction. And there's just such opportunities to really improve there. So over the course of this administration, we started with a couple discrete projects that they asked us to help them with. So we were helping them rebuild their website to be much simpler to use. And it wasn't the whole website, it was the top 20% of functionality that is most frequently used. They called us to help them with their call center technology. During the pandemic, they had to make some changes to their roadmap for how they were going to implement call centers so that people could work from home in the call center. Call center representatives could work from home. And that had forced them to adopt some older, less ideal technology. And now they were having trouble modernizing their roadmap and figuring out where to go from there. And so we did some discrete work. And over time, each of those things had such a high degree of success in close collaboration between USDS and the agency that it generated a lot of buy-in and momentum, such that now we are working on a number of engagements with them. They have committed to hiring a number of people. It kind of is the perfect example to me of that theory of change and the story of you come in when there's something that's really a problem that's broken and everyone is motivated, we need to change this. But over a march of a number of all of engineering is you fix one problem and then you find another problem and then you fix that problem and you find another problem, right? And demonstrating that it's really possible to fix the problems then allows the agency to say, we really should be meeting should be meeting a higher bar across the board. How do we do it? And let's start actually burning those down and doing it. And so it's just been incredibly rewarding to see. So and just to get into the numbers, because I didn't say them in the beginning,
Sure.
But, we worked with them on the website. I think I have no idea what they thought we would get to, right? But customer satisfaction is up 56% on the website since we worked with them to re-platform it and to do tons of plain language testing with real users to help people understand what they're trying to do. We put screeners in front. Task completion is up 10%. And in re-platforming it, which hadn't been done in a very long time, we've also saved them, I think, something like $280 million over a 5-year plan. Okay, so that's pretty appealing to them. So then they said, okay, now we have these call center challenges, right? We have about 70 million calls a year that come into Social Security. That's insane. And if I'm a customer service rep on a call center, I have something like 14 different applications that I have to have open to navigate. So it's very complicated. And all of those systems keep track of what people are calling about in different ways. So they hadn't been able to aggregate that data to figure out how can we start to, so their wait times on the call center were about 42 minutes. That's tens of millions of hours that Americans are waiting on hold every year. And so we worked with them to aggregate the data from the backends of all those systems to say, what are people calling about and what pieces of that can we offload either to online or by giving people clearer guidance about when they should be checking on their claims or by implementing callbacks. And so we, started burning down different categories of what was causing those wait times. And through so doing together, we've now moved that wait time down to less than 12 minutes, which is incredible, tens of millions of hours back that the public has every year. So, and now we're working with them on how to more efficiently pay out lump sum death payments. So when a loved one dies, there's a lump sum payment. It's sort of like a very complex process. And at a very, very pivotal moment in your life, which is when someone you love has passed away. And so, there are just so many incredibly important things at SSA. And so that has been a tremendous project just because the agency, it has been sort of the perfect snowball effect of an agency really deciding to take that on.
That is pretty incredible. I didn't know a lot about that, mostly because Social Security is not what I normally cover, but now I want to. And that all sounds so incredible. And while you were talking, I kept on thinking of something that I've heard a lot through, I've only been doing this for a year and a half almost. But an incremental approach of, you talked about, first it was this one burning issue, and then it was, well, we should, take the next step. And I wanted to know if you could elaborate a little bit your thoughts on modernizing federal agencies who are so public facing, and I know that's been such a focus of the Biden administration, is CX and customer experience. And can you talk to the need, or if this is what you believe, the need to modernize incrementally, to, take off like one piece of the pie at a time instead of, the entire thing? Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So I'm an engineer. And if you want to build something that's complicated, you can so the only way I know to build something like start to finish without any iteration is if you're copying something, right? If you're copying something that somebody else has done, then like, okay, you follow the instructions, you have your little Lego thing, you do the thing, like it's a waterfall process, you got it. Out comes like the little Lego lady in the truck. But for anything that is complicated, for anything that involves multiple systems, has humans in the loop, the real world and how things actually behave and how people react is very unpredictable. And so the engineering approach, right, and scientific method is like you try something, you think that it will play out a certain way, you take some measurements of what actually happens. There are lots of good quotes about this, about how like no piece of equipment ever survives first contact without any modifications, right? Like there's nothing, it's never the case that you like write a document or anything and you show it to somebody and they perfectly grok exactly what you were trying to say the first time and don't have any like modifications for it, right? If we take a journalistic perspective. So the iterative approach, especially when there are humans, especially when there are multiple systems, is crucially important to making sure that you iteratively get to it. The two pieces that you need is what is your objective, where are you aiming, and then using an iterative process to get to there, where you are constantly able to evaluate, are we making progress towards our objective or away from our objective? And if we're not making progress towards our objective, what adjustments do we need to make? And if we are, great, like let's continue on this path. So that's like a classic sort of how you debug a system. Nobody like, I'm an electrical engineering by training, and we used to like joke in electrical engineering, like, oh, we'll just turn it on and it'll work. And it never does, right? There's always something wrong. You always have to find out where you specified your resistors incorrectly or designed something wrong. And the same is true in software, and even more true when there are people in the loop. So figuring out how to build a ton of iteration that involves getting measurements of what happens in the actual environment and real world is critically important. And that is what great companies do really well. And it's really, really hard to do in the government environment because of a combination of factors, including like norms that have grown up around how contracts get written and managed, expectations from oversight bodies on how things should be executed. And so there, expectations of leadership on how things should get rolled out, and things that are, requirements that are specifically written into legislation. So there's lots of things that make it harder to do sort of the gold standard, which is build a little thing, test it with real humans. And when I say humans, there's like users. You also, if you're building something for call center representatives to interact with humans, what you really need is to let the call center representative look at what you're building and say, can you have a normal conversation with somebody while you're looking at this? Does it give you the answers that you need? Does it make it quick for you to answer their questions? A deeply iterative process is really the most important for how you get to magical experiences that like really enhance a interpersonal or an interorganizational interaction. And that takes a lot of expertise to know how to do it well, and it takes a lot of work to do it. And work and willingness to sort of help shift the status quo to do it in government right now. And I see progress there, right? But so, OIRA just released new PRA guidance on how to do user testing. It's fantastic. And, I think that really opens the door. So user testing is a crucial piece that I just mentioned of this iterative process that allows you to actually gather that data on how we're doing. And so OIRA is making that clear to agencies how to tackle that so that they don't feel like they're in violation of the PRA. Sidebar, it's like a little bit recursive here because we actually also worked with OIRA to user test their guidance. So OIRA said we want to put out guidance that makes it easier for agencies. And we were like, let's go together and user test it with agencies. And we did that together. And it made the guidance so much clearer and stronger because we could understand, it's more important what people hear than what you exactly say. It's more important that you write things in a way that it can be understood what you're actually trying to say. So we user tested that, and then they were able to publish it, and it really is incredibly valuable. So I think there's progress on all of these things. The digital experience guidance that OFCIO put out also starts to create norms and expectations about how iterative processes can work. But there's still a lot of areas, both from an oversight perspective that we can improve and where we have to build out the norms and practices across government.
For more on the U.S. Digital Service, make sure to visit fedscoop.com. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Daily Scoop podcast, available on all podcast platforms. If you've already rated the podcast on your platform of choice, thanks so much. High ratings and good reviews of the show help more people to find it. The Daily Scoop podcast is a production of the Scoop News Group in Washington, D.C. Adam Butler and Carlin Fisher help put the show together, and the entire Scoop News Group team contributes. We'll be back tomorrow with more top headlines. Until then, I'm your host, Billy Mitchell. Thanks so much for listening.